So I was commenting on Reddit yesterday, which should not be a surprise. That's basically all I do with my life now. And someone was talking about collections and consoles, and eventually I joined the conversation, talked about how many consoles I had, and the person said that my collection was #goals. And I will start off by saying I was flattered to the point where I'll even overlook them calling the pound sign a hashtag. But I would be remiss if I didn't caution people against having my collection as a goal. And the more I thought about that, and the more I had this conversation with this person, I thought that there was an interesting video there. And so here we are making said video. So first, before I get into it, I just want to say I love my collection. It is my greatest achievement. It is the thing I'm proudest of. I've spent over 30 years building this collection. And along the way, I've really come to appreciate not just video games for how fun they are to play, but the effort that goes into them, the whole industry surrounding them, just everything about games and gaming and game collecting I really love. Along the way, I've met just tons of really cool gamers and collectors, store owners and developers, and just the artists that make these things. I've gotten the chance to actually put my voice into a video game that comes out later this year. We'll talk about that more later. I really love the industry. I love games. I want to say that first. If that wasn't already clear, that's the message I want to put out. I don't want the tone of this video to come across otherwise. But if you haven't already committed yourself to this dragon's horde of games, I do have 3 warnings that I should give, and maybe just a few tips to help. So my first warning is the most obvious, and that is, this is a very expensive hobby. If you've been collecting for a few years, you already are aware of just how ridiculously the prices have increased. Even more than just inflation would make you think they would. But also, the whole WADA controversy has shown that there are now plenty of bad actors in the space that are trying to use games as an investment or a scheme and just a way to make more money, and because of that, prices have went up. And as the hobby continues to become more mainstream, which it is doing, the prices are just going to get worse. Not only that, but it's going to become less and less likely, due to everyone having the internet now, that you'll find just insane deals. You know, the days of going to a yard sale and finding a giant box of complete in-box NES games for $10, that's not a thing anymore. You know, you're no longer going to walk into a Goodwill and while browsing the DVD section come across copies of Rule of Rose and Clock Tower for $2 each. That's no longer a possibility. Those days are pretty much gone. As I've said, I've spent over 30 years building this collection. So there are games I have here that, with no sale or discounts, I was able to go into an actual game store and buy them for literally a quarter. And the days of that happening are just gone. Those deals and those kinds of prices certainly don't exist today with the inflated game market, but it's never going to get back to a point where those prices exist either. You've missed that boat, and game collecting is now just an expensive hobby. So if you wanted to try and amass a collection like I have, which, by the way, there's over 50 different consoles represented here, and I'm pushing close to 3,700 games. And if you thought you were going to build a similar collection, you need a lot of disposable income. At today's market value, everything I have here is worth close to, if not over, the 6-figure range. Honestly, that's just a bit obscene. And actually, speaking of things that are obscene, I finally bought my own house late last year, a few months back. And after about a month of living here, I was able to unpack all my games for the first time in quite a while. And actually I say that, but let me go mobile for a second here. Okay, so there's the camera. Very professional setup, as you can see. But while I do have games out and displayed, those are all the Switch games, alphabetized of course, Saturn and CD, this obnoxious wall. But as you can see, not everything is on a shelf or has a place. all along the floor and the edges of the room, there's all kinds of nonsense. My cable management doesn't exist, don't judge me. And actually, there's more stuff. There's more stuff. And, little peek behind the curtain here, there's a whole nother half to this room. I had to manufacture shelves to bisect the room and create a false wall just to be able to fit everything. And by everything, I don't mean everything, because in the other room here are 2 large boxes of controllers and cords, a display case of all my Zelda, the arcade machines that don't fit in the game room, another display case of Zelda, and an entire wall of console boxes. And no, this was not meant to be a room tour or any kind of brag. That was just to really illustrate how much space a collection of this size requires. This is one of the larger rooms in the house, and it still barely fits all the games, and as you saw, it technically doesn't because there's all kinds of stuff still in other rooms taking up space. Not to mention the tons of posters that are framed, but I don't have room on the walls to hang them in this room. And this isn't even taking into account the 3 large boxes of collectibles that I gave away after unpacking this room, and the fact that all the rest of the collectibles that I did hang on to have been unboxed so they take up less space. Not the amiibos, but as you can see, things like all the Pokemon toys and all these little figures up here used to be sealed in their original boxes, but the boxes take up more room than the figures, so that all had to go. So if you really wanted to have a collection of this size and scope, then your first mode of attack and planning for this should be to buy a really big house. And then, when you've got that space and you're all settled there and you have the money you need, there's still one more thing to consider. At some point, with a collection this big, you have to understand what you've done. You've gotten yourself to a point where you can no longer play all your video games. If I were to win the lottery today, and I no longer had any obligations for my time, I could spend it however I wanted, every day, I could just play video games exclusively. It would still take me years, if not decades, to play and beat every game that I own. And that's not including any new games that I have on pre-order or that I would want to pick up in the future. That's just current collection as it stands today, decades. So, basically at this point, I've just resigned myself to know that I'm not collecting video games. I'm collecting colorful shelf decorations. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I still love the games. I still do play some of them. But the harsh reality is I'm never going to play all of them. And if you're going to have a collection of this size, you need to understand that too. And a lot of different gamers and really large collectors who have things of this size or larger, because there are, of course, larger collections, they make similar comments. James Rolfe has talked about this before. I'm pretty sure Pat the NES Punk has too. Lots of these people, they understand that at some point it stops being a collection of games and starts just being a collection. So that's one thing you kind of have to mentally prepare yourself for. And like I said, that's not a terrible thing. I still enjoy the games. I still enjoy looking at them. I like what they represent. I love the effort that goes into making them. And when I buy them, I still have the intention of eventually playing them. You know, I generally buy ones of genres or franchises that I enjoy because they're games that theoretically I would play. It's just a matter of realistically, I'll never have the time. And you have to understand that that means that you won't have that time either. Unless you're the child of an oil tycoon or something like that, in which case, I guess maybe you will. And also, do you want to be best friends? But now that I've kind of crapped all over collecting and just brought the mood down a little, let me switch gears for a minute and let me try and give some advice or tips to build up would-be collectors and maybe help you out if you're just starting in the game collecting avenue. And again, other collectors might have other advice. I'm not pretending that I'm the end-all be-all of collectors or that I have all the secrets to collecting properly. That's not by any means the case. I just happen to have a very large collection and know a few people in the industry and a lot of other collectors, so I thought I might have some tips that are worth considering if you're going to get into all of this. So the first thing is to set goals for your collection. If you want to get into this, decide why and what you want to collect. You know, are you just going to try and find all the old games that you're nostalgic for, but maybe you traded away or lost or sold off at some point along your life? Or maybe you just have a favorite franchise or a favorite console, and so you want to collect all the games in that franchise or for that console. Those are great goals, and you should be aware of those ahead of time so that you can plan for them. If you haven't established that goal or any just specific mindset, and you just go into this thinking, I want to collect all the games, then very, very soon you will find yourself completely overwhelmed and just underwater, surrounded in PlayStation-branded everything. And any money that you did have set aside for specific collectibles will end up completely gone, and you won't even make a tiny dent in the list of things that you end up thinking you need to collect. For example, my favorite franchise is Zelda. As you saw, I have the display cases with all the Zelda games in them, and I'm only a couple away from having all of the games in complete condition. That was an important milestone for me. The thing is, I also really like Castlevania, and Pokemon, and Hyperdimension Neptunia. So, I've been trying to get all the games for those franchises too, preferably complete in box. And then I realized that there's other franchises I really like the Tales of series, or Mortal Kombat, or Sonic the Hedgehog, and Harvest Moon, and Tetris, and eventually you just go down this rabbit hole of you now have a list of 200 plus games that you need to get to complete all these franchises, and then getting them all in complete in box condition, you realize that some of them are hundreds or thousands of dollars. And like I said, it's very easy to snowball into just an unconquerable mountain. Plus, if you go into this with a specific goal or a specific plan, it makes things a bit easier to take care of. For example, I mentioned Harvest Moon. If you wanted to, say, get all the Harvest Moon games, well, first you would realize that there's more than you thought. Second, that includes Rune Factory and Story of Seasons, so it's a little bit broader scope, but at least now you're prepared, and you can plan. So let's say you're just starting out, and that's your goal. You can maybe buy a Hometown Story now, because it's only $10, and you can put off something like the Super Nintendo Harvest Moon, which is going to be hundreds of dollars, until later on down the line when you've saved up the money, and maybe that'll also give you time to find a good deal somewhere. But speaking of having the money, one main thing you should really focus on is setting a budget and knowing how you're going to come at this financially. It actually isn't a bad idea to go look up some of the games that you really know you want or that need to be part of your collection ahead of time, and look up completed purchases on eBay, get a broad idea of what these games realistically sell for. And that way you can have a number in your mind of, okay, I'm not going to pay more than X. Because it's very easy as an impulse to be at a convention or a game store and see a game that you know you want and don't see frequently, and just pay whatever the sticker price is because you're excited to finally see this game. And that's great. You finally found that copy of Demon's Crest you've always wanted. But did you just pay $200 for a loose cart when it's actually only worth about $120? Those are the kind of things you need to plan for, you need to budget for, you need to avoid. Also, the money that you put into games should not be the first priority for your money. I know this sounds like common sense, but for some people it is real easy to get addicted and to get a little too into it because you get that bit of serotonin every time you find that game you want, and some people can get addicted to that feeling, and you need to make sure that you're not going to make yourself broke. You should never be missing your rent or your utility bills. You should never run out of gas or groceries because you spent all your money on video games. And I can give a specific example here, actually. When I was younger and around college age and struggling to have anything that resembled money in my life, I got the opportunity to buy the Donkey Kong Country competition cart for $200. It was not an amazing deal at the time. It was just a fair deal. However, I did not have $200. And if I gave this person $200, I would not make my rent payment that month, I wouldn't have gas in my car, and my phone and electric would both get turned off. So in the end of the day, I did not pay the money, I did not get the game. Since then, it has become my holy grail. That is the game I want more than anything. I've only seen it in the wild one other time since then. It was going for $2 grand. So, realistically, I turned down what was probably a once-in-a-lifetime deal to get that game. However, I can't say that I regret it because it was absolutely the right decision to turn it down. And that's the kind of thing that you need to be prepared to do with your collecting too. If you get these deals, but you just literally cannot afford them, you need to be able to walk away. You need to understand that it's not in your budget, it's not going to help you to buy it, just don't get it. Because once it crosses that line where you're spending money you don't have, you're no longer collecting, you're now hoarding, and it's become an addiction, and it's just unhealthy. And that's the wrong thing to be doing in this situation. And speaking of games making financial sense and being a good use of your money, that's another thing I want to talk about. Get into game collecting for the right reason. There are a lot of people who think this is going to be an investment. You know, you're going to find that World Championship cart for $5 in an attic, flip it for $80,000, and you're going to make so much money. That's the wrong mindset. And honestly, if that's your whole goal, don't buy Nintendo games. Buy Nintendo stock. Take the dividends and buy more stock. Like, there are better ways to make money than trying to use video games as an investment tool. And honestly, it kind of ruins the hobby for everyone else if you do it that way, because prices get driven up ridiculously and sometimes artificially, especially with the whole WADA scam. It's just, that's the wrong reason to do it. It's not going to work out the way you think it is, and it's going to ruin it for everyone else. And that's another little aspect of this that maybe it's tangential, but I want to get into anyway, is that you enjoying the hobby shouldn't ruin the hobby for everyone else. I've had this discussion online with game collectors, and people always get very butthurt and angry because they think I'm attacking them. But basically, if your enjoyment of the hobby takes away other people's enjoyment of the hobby, you're doing it wrong. For example, if you're one of those guys that wants to go out and buy 100 sealed copies of a game, and then open or destroy 99 of them just to make the value of your one more, you're just a dick. Like, that's 99 other collectors who maybe really wanted to have a sealed copy because it's an important copy to them, they have a nostalgic collection to it, whatever, and you've taken that away from all of them just to artificially drive up the price of your one. Like, okay, great, you gained a little bit of extra money, but at the cost of 99 other people's enjoyment. Like, that's not cool. That's not... Don't get into the hobby just to ruin it for other people. That's awful. You know, if you don't want sealed games, if you disagree with sealed games, don't buy them. There are incredible, near-mint condition, complete in-box copies of every game already out there. They're opened, but they're still immaculate. Just buy those. And that way you have a copy you can play, and it looks great on the shelf, but you're not taking sealed copies out of the already small population for the few collectors that still want them. So just make sure when you get into this that you're doing it for the right reasons. Don't do it to be a griefer and ruin it for other people. Don't do it as an investment or quick cash, because nothing about this is quick and you really won't make that much cash. The last thing we need is more crappy WADA people related to this hobby. And actually, speaking of crappy people, if you're really going to get into collecting, eventually you're going to inevitably go after some of the more high-ticket, rarer items. And that's fine, it's great, you should. They're really awesome to have, you really feel accomplished when you get them. However, you need to be aware of the kinds of people that are out there. There are pirates, there are counterfeiters, there are bad games. It's something that unfortunately we have to deal with and you have to be aware of. Everyone's familiar with, the scalpers, buying all the Xboxes and PS5s and charging double, triple, quadruple manufacturing price because they're horrible, awful people. I've dealt with a bunch of them. It actually took me 7 tries to finally get the Xbox Series X. Between people putting up fake listings or canceling my bids because they thought it should sell for more, people leading me on and thinking it's a valid sale and then saying that, oh, well, you have to send me the money on Cash App first because my wife doesn't want you to come in the house yet. She's skeptical. Like, whatever. There's a million scams. People suck. But beyond that, people will really do things tricky. For example, I have a bunch of the Pokemon distribution cartridges. If you're not familiar, they're little cartridges you put in the DS when you work at a store, and you put them in the store's DS, and it acts basically as a kiosk, I cannot talk, where customers come in with their DSs and their games already in it, and I connect via IR, and then they can receive a free legendary from your distribution cart. They were all limited time things just for specific promotions that Nintendo did with the various stores, and the carts were supposed to be destroyed or sent back afterward. A lot of times that didn't happen. As someone that worked in a game store, I can tell you most of the employees are very lazy. They don't want to do the extra effort. When we're told to destroy something, it rarely happens. The store that I managed had a giant box of games in the back that were supposed to be destroyed. They never were. They just sat in that box forever. I was always mad about it because there was a copy of The Punisher for Game Boy that I really wanted and I couldn't have. But, off topic. My point is, those distribution carts, if you were to go on eBay today, you would find a DS cart that has distributions for like 12 different legendaries on it. That's not how those carts worked. Each one was for a single promotion at a time. So you could get, Meloetta, or Keldeo, or the legendary birds. But it was always a specific promotion. But the carts that they're offering have all of the promotions put onto one cart. Those are not official from Nintendo. It's a fake, bogus cart. It's a reproduction cart that someone dumped a bunch of ROMs onto and made it. But if you look in the listing, at no point does it say that. And on the fake label that they've mocked up for it, it has the Nintendo branding. So unless you know what to look for, you might buy this thinking you found something really cool, and you didn't. You wasted your money, you got ripped off. Likewise, there's a bunch of distribution carts for the GBA out there. GBA didn't have distribution carts. They had this whole hardware console thing that would broadcast out that was actually installed in stores before they went the cart direction with the DS. So whenever you see the GBA cartridges offering distributions for like Ruby and Sapphire, those are fake too. So a lot of those things exist. Another great example is these, which I didn't think about when I put in my pocket. My pocket's not the right size, they won't come out. But these are prototype carts for the NES. These were used by the companies to test the game before it was production ready. They got it to a certain point of development, they would dump whatever ROM they had onto a cartridge and then put it in a system that they had in hand just to test and see how does this work on real hardware, does it hold up well, is it playable, what bugs do we run into, what do we have to fix. These are hard to find, they're unique, they're rare, they're not as available as some people think they are, but they have value. If you were to go on eBay right now, I know because I was looking a couple days ago, there is someone with supposedly a prototype cart for Clu Clu Land for the NES. And I collect prototype carts. These are not the only ones I have. I actually really love getting them for weird, lesser-known games. That's just fun for me. So the Clu Clu Land one is one I would normally pick up. Well, the first red flag is it's in a WATA case. So right off the bat, I hate this because someone paid to have it graded by a terrible scam company, and that's never good. Supporting them in any way is awful. But as I asked the person questions, I said, hey, I noticed you don't have any pictures of the board on the inside. How do I know this isn't a retail copy of Clu Clu Land where someone pulled the sticker off and put a homemade one in its place? Or how do I know it's even that game at all? How do I know someone didn't just buy a blank reproduction shell and then stick it in this WATA case? And they're like, oh, these are excellent questions. We don't have those pictures, and we aren't the people that graded it. We bought this from a retailer of sealed games, and they got it from WATA. But they might have paid for board photos. Do you want me to ask? I'm like, no. No, I don't. This all seems sketchy. This whole he said, she said story, none of this seems legitimate. And I tell all this to say those are the kinds of red flags that you need to be aware of when you get into collecting. You need to know what questions to ask and what things to look for, and what things sellers say that automatically should make the hair on the back of your neck stand up and say, no, this is wrong, I don't like this, walk away. Basically, it's the old adage, if it seems too good to be true, it is. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, that is an item that I would love to have. The price was a bit outrageous. $1,000 for a prototype cart of a game that no one cares about is too much. It should be half that at most. But, you know, it's something I would have considered buying. But as soon as I saw those red flags, I was okay to just walk away and say, no, this isn't for me. I'm no longer interested. Pass. And that's a skill you need to develop. You need to be able to walk away. And unfortunately, it's not just isolated to really unique stuff like that. Like there are the fake prototype cards, the fake distribution cards, because they're unique things. People don't see them often, so they're really easy to rip people off with because they don't know what to look for. Every copy of Mario's Wacky Worlds for the CDI that you've ever seen, they're all fake. There are a couple prototype discs out there. None of them have hit eBay. None of them look like what the ones on eBay look like. Those are all bogus. And then more commonly, most Pokemon GBA games you see for sale are fake. It's sad, but honestly, a majority of them are counterfeits. It's rampant in the industry. Most collectors are very well aware of it. There are entire pages and pages of posts on the game validation subreddit showing you what to look for specifically on Pokemon cards. It's an epidemic on the GBA how many of those games are counterfeited. But there's a lot you have to look out for and have to be aware of because this is unfortunately very prevalent in the hobby. This stuff happens all the time, and you need to know that it's there and you need to familiarize yourself with it. So I guess that's my advice here, is just learn what to look for before you buy anything. The minute you start going after a high-ticket item, or even sometimes just middle-of-the-road uncommon games, once the game's valued over like $50, you should know what the fake ones look like just to make sure your $50 goes toward the real thing. And really, that's pretty much it. Like I said, I know this video might have come across as negative. It might sound like I hate the industry or the hobby or that I'm trying to scare people away. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I genuinely love it. I love game collecting. I've been doing this forever. I've spent a ton of time and money on it, and I regret none of it. I love everything about it. I love this collection. It is my favorite thing in the world. It was the reason I wanted to buy a house, was to have a room full of these games. So I don't want to scare you away. If this is what you want to do, great. You should. It's amazing. I just want to make sure that people go into it, if you're someone that isn't a major collector, go into it with realistic expectations and just know what you're doing so you don't get in over your head. And to the person who said that this was their hashtag goal, you know, great. However, I'm never going to stop buying games. You're never going to beat me. I will always be better.